Hey, in today's episode, we're talking about how to help your kids be conscious consumers of their content and their technology. I have a special guest, Jeremy Lenentine. Jeremy, we're glad to have you here.
Hey, Luke. Yep, good to be with you.
We are excited to get in today's episode. My name is Luke Clayton, and this is Connection Culture. But I did want to kind of go back to something that you kind of were started to talk about a little bit earlier. And you talked about replacing. You replaced some of that content with, stuff that's more maybe constructive, edifying, encouraging to your children. I do like even that approach of you kind of said, on an even bigger scale, replacing things like watching television with reading. And that is something that, because a lot of times it's like, well, you don't just have to replace the actual media type, you can replace the medium altogether. Because, the kid, if you just take it out of their life, well, now they've just got free idle time. What are they going to do with it? Well, most likely, a very good chance they're going to find something else they shouldn't be doing. But replacing that content with something else. Have you found, though, a benefit to, and again, I've made it very clear before, where you draw the kind of line of like, hey, this is what you can watch, this is what you can't watch. There's some things that just, we're just not going to watch it at all. Whatever. But in watching some stuff that might have questionable content, have you found any, benefit? Or maybe it's more of like, you mentioned your kids there having exposure to this previous content that to the point it gives them bad dreams. Have you found any value to taking an approach of, well, let's learn from that. Let's learn why that is bad. Let's learn why that's not best or why that's inappropriate or whatever. Have you had to take that approach at all with your kids?
Yeah, we have. Now that they are a little bit older, we've started down that road of saying, this is why we don't watch this, this is why we do watch this. And like what you said, and actually we're trying out right now a subscription to VidAngel to see, because there's some really good stories out there. Like, let's just say if you're watching them with your kid, there's some really good stories out there, just imaginative or other things, right? Stories that you can even, like, for example, there's a lot of things sometimes I talk to my kids about, like the kind of the biblical narratives and examples that are inside something like Lord of the Rings. And so I know that sounds silly and stupid, but it's some great imaginative, some really good writing, that's in some of these movies. And so for it to be like kind of tainted by like one or two words throughout the whole thing, is kind of a bummer because there is a lot of good things there. So I think that a service, like a VidAngel or something that you can take that bad content out of is really helpful. But yeah, we've been able to explain to them, taking some extra time and talking about it afterwards. And I think that's really important, that a lot of times as parents we don't take that time just to explain something to our kids because we forget about it or we're bugged or it just takes time. But if we would, then we're helping them to establish like decision making. And the best thing that you can give your kid is not a sheltered environment, but a biblical mind frame for decision making.
Yep.
And if you can give that to them, and this is what I like what you're doing with this podcast, is I think that's what you're trying to establish for us as adults, and then now we're talking about kids. But the point is that how should I look at culture through a biblical mind frame, right? Let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus. That's the whole point. How should I think about this? How Christ would think about it. And if it's always just like avoid, don't think about it, put your head in the sand, then you're never teaching them like the skills to think through something. And then one day they're not in your house and it's like, all these things that all of us that have grown up in a strict home, we know how that is. I remember the first time thinking at 19, I'm like, I could do what I want to do. And like, there's not somebody here, and there's that like their delirium of freedom. But then if it's not kicked in right away by like some type of, okay, well, here's how I should think about things for myself, then you're probably prone to make a lot of mistakes from 18 to 28 or whatever. And a lot of people do. And that's why a lot of people leave church. And then when do they get back into church? In their 30s. Well, why do they get back in church? Oh, because now they have kids, and they're like, well, I don't want them really to turn out how I turned out or how I've done or whatever. But it's probably due to a parent not giving their kid, they've given their kid shelter and protection, but they haven't given them the tools to like really independently think about stuff. So as a parent, I think that that's our greatest job, is not sheltering, because your kids are gonna hear things, they're gonna see things, and that's unfortunate, but it's true. But how do we let them think about it in the way that they should, to not let that influence their life in the way that they live or in what one day they willingly consume? So I think increasingly that's more and more important. Now when you just drive down the road and billboards are the way they are, or commercials are the way they are, how are you going to screen every commercial? You can't. How are you going to screen every billboard as you drive? You can't. So it's important more for us to teach our kids how to have filtered thinking, which is what Philippians 4:8 talks about, versus protecting them from ever having that thought pass through their head. If that makes sense, I'm not saying it right, but
you're hitting the nail on the head there. I mean, really, this comes back to the idea of we really, as a parent, and really, let's generalize it as a, if you will, student to, or teacher to student, mentor to protege, parent to child, however you want to do it, as someone who is responsible for developing and mentoring and leading someone, your job is not to teach them what to think, it's to teach them how to think. And I think that is one of the greatest kind of things that's even missed. We're talking about, the Christian faith. That's one of the greatest things even missed about Christianity, is so many people have even turned that into some type of, hey, this is where we teach you what to think. But really, the Christianity at its core is a way to think, not a what to think. It's so that it's something that, a lens, like you keep saying, a mindset, a lens that you can view the world through, and a way that you kind of process all of your thinking is done through this filter of the teachings of Jesus Christ and Scripture. And it's not about what we think. It's not about hey, you have to think this and you have to believe exactly this. It's more about, no, this is about how you think. And we've got to have that mindset in general with our kids. And something else that you kind of started to talk about there was, when it comes to, for example, what they're watching, and what they're seeing, what they're being exposed to. Yeah, you can draw some lines, and you can say, yeah, well, absolutely never would I let my child watch this, rated R content, or, horribly gory, language filled. Obviously you're going to draw some lines there, as you should. But you even said this, can you really, how do you control what shows up on a billboard? How do you control, what shows up in a commercial? Can you turn off a commercial? Maybe, but a commercial is 15 to 30 seconds. And so, you can be exposed to, as much as half the commercial can be, acceptable. And then boom, all of a sudden something sneaks in and what do you do about that? So, I think it's a lot about, you keep saying it's sheltering. And like we've emphasized so many times, sheltering is not the best approach. It's filtering. It's teaching them how to think. And in some ways, it's that guided discovery, because your child is going to discover. They're going to discover this world around them. They're going to learn, whether you wanted them to or not. We all do want our child to grow, to learn, and or whatnot. But whether you want them to discover the, whatever you want to call it, the filth, the wickedness, the evil aspects of the world, they're going to discover it. And if we can give them a guided discovery process where we say, okay, yes, you figured out, or if you will, you discovered that inappropriate word, or you discovered, that cuss word, or you discovered this inappropriate aspect of, maybe television, an inappropriate type of scene or something like that. Okay, well, you discovered that, but I was nearby. I was there to stop it before it got too far, and I was there to teach you, use that as a moment to teach you of why and how we need to process that and deal with that. And I think that's really important, is that idea of guided discovery and teaching them how to think, not just what to think.
And that's amazing, because if the Bible, think about this, if the Bible was a book that was just written, Jesus, for example, telling his disciples what to think, well, that was written 2,000 years ago. It would have been unapplicable, 1,500 years ago. But since the Bible is a book that teaches you how to think, those are eternal principles that you can put into play no matter what generation, time, age, technology you're working with at that point. And so same thing, if you teach your kids, well, you're not going to watch this, and this. Okay, well, in 20 years, those shows are long gone. No one watches those. Here's a new field of shows, probably have a lot of the same bad things in them, or even worse. And so if you've never taught them how to think, then they can't ever pick up on their own what are those things that they should avoid in their generation, their time. So really, the Bible's masterful at being applicable over the course of 4,000 years. How do you write a book that's applicable 4,000 years let's say 3,000 years in the future? How would you write a book today that's applicable 300 years in the future? It's amazing. I mean, that's why there's the documents like the Bible, our Constitution. Those ones that have eternally binding principles are so renowned and fascinating, because for them to still be relevant today is amazing. Supernatural, but obviously amazing. So.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, for those out there who, maybe you're watching, listening, and you say, well, I'm not a person of faith or whatever. Well, yeah, I think that, like you said, the Constitution is another great example of, it's not necessarily about, black and white. Here's what you can do, what you can't do. Yes, there's foundational moral laws of what you can and can't do, but it's really about a way of living. It's about a how. It's about the idea of, having, liberty and freedom, the right to the pursuit of happiness, and then, the freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, all of these things. These are about just, hey, this is a way of life that you're entitled to and that you can live. It's not saying here's what you can and can't do necessarily, as much as it's saying, hey, here is how you can live, which honestly, I don't know if we intended to drift into this, but I'm going to. You are a very politically aware person. And if you've ever listened to our other podcast, Church Media HQ, Jeremy is a regular contributor, and we've actually taken a deep dive to some extent into your involvement with local politics, and you're a city councilor, and which I think is awesome. But you and I have also talked some interesting, kind of ideas and thoughts about politics and government and things like that. And so I don't want to get too super political, but that just leads me to this thing, kind of something that is really becoming an underlying thought of a certain. Again, I'm trying not to be too political, but it's of a certain line of thinking.
It's hard not to, right?
It seems to be more dominant on one side than the other, if you will, at least right now, is this idea that if they deem that it is good, it should be required. And if they deem that it is bad, it should be banned. And there's other ways of wording that they're probably more articulate, but and now, I did talk about this as well in a recent episode that at the time of recording hasn't been released, so you haven't heard it. But basically, it was Bo and I having a conversation about this idea of cancel culture. Unfortunately, it seems to be like a big deal right now on the left, but I would argue that it has actually been happening on both sides for a long time. And that is when you take kind of this extreme positioning on either side and you say, hey, just because this person doesn't fall in line with me and agree with me on everything and fall in line with me on every way of thinking, well, I'm going to kick them out of my life. I'm done with them. They're no longer a part. And we see that happen maybe on a more personal level on the right. But I mean, I can think about people that's like, hey, they have cut off ties with own family members over really minuscule things. And so anyways, I just wanted you to have some context of why I'm jumping into this. because it's a conversation we've had recently. But, in your experience, I know that your state is also leans one way over the other, if you will, in terms of a color or a side. It's a little bit more bluish, I suppose, than reddish. And so what have been your experiences there in seeing maybe this idea play out that, hey, if it's something that we think is good, we're going to require it. And if it's something bad, we are going to try to abolish it. Have you seen this, and how have you dealt with it?
Well, what's so interesting, yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you said is absolutely true, is that they want everything that they're for to be mandated and everything that they're against to be prohibited. And that's 100% accurate. What's so funny is that's what they've accused us for forever, right? Well, I work at a church, and so let me just take this into the church world for a relevant example. It was like, you guys are so against homosexual marriage. And it's like, well, no, I mean, it's more like we're so for pro-choice, being able to choose what you want to do with your life. And so from a biblical standpoint, yeah, I can say that the Bible is against certain things, but do I think that the government should be in charge of enforcing those certain things? No, because I think from a government level, for the most part, just here's my personal belief, people should be free to do what they want to do, so long as it doesn't hurt or harm another person. So the famous quote, I guess, for libertarian is that I should be allowed to, swing around my fist as long as it doesn't make contact with your face. And so that's probably a good way to look at it, right? Is my liberties extend as far as not encroaching upon yours. So yeah, I mean, that to talk about prohibited versus mandated. I mean, I often sit here and wonder how long is this going to be before, through cracking down on what we say hate speech, and everyone agrees it's hate speech is wrong. And so they take a common term, you could go forever on this. They take a common term and then they blow out what's included in their common term and say, well, see, everyone's against hate speech. I agree, but I don't have the same definition as you do with hate speech. So if you're saying now that because my church thinks that homosexual marriage is wrong according to the Bible, that now we've crossed into hate speech, therefore we should get shut down, then I don't have the same definition as you do about hate speech. And so the expansion of picking a common term that's widely accepted, but then expanding what is inside that common term and then saying, see there, everyone is for this, is a really, really subtle trick. And I could go a lot of ways in which I think that they've done it, none of which are appropriate for right now. But I think that you're right. I think we're seeing that a lot. We're seeing that a lot in our state. Our state tends to just do kind of whatever California does, even though I don't think California has many successes that they could point to, that we always want to follow California, whereas I think we should probably follow our neighbor to the east. But, whatever, that's where we are. We're trapped here with that. And so I think it's more difficult, and there's a lot of people, unfortunately, I think, that are going to leave states that are going to try to over mandate or over prohibit, and they're going to go to states where they have more freedom to do what they think that they should be able to do. And I think that their solution on the other side is not to, well, maybe we should allow people to choose more. What their solution is going to be, well, maybe the national government should mandate it for all the states. That's what they're going to do. And so they should learn from their mistake and realize, okay, we should be more competitive, with other states like Florida or Texas or whatever. But they won't do that. They'll just try to get Florida and Texas to comply. So now we've just kind of said exactly what we're talking about here. We got really specific there. So there you go.
No,
I kind of blew your anonymity out of the window there.
No, it's fine. Well, I always try to start from a neutral standpoint, just for sake of, because you know me by now, you know that I always try to be very objective, and I think you do too. And I always try, I really do. I try to see both sides. I really can honestly say that's something I try to do.
Yeah, you do.
And it's something, though, that in the end, it's like, well, sometimes there's just this one side that still just makes no sense. By the way, your neighbor to the east, are you talking about Texas there? Is that who you're referring to? Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of your southeast there. For those who don't know geography very well, and because I do, I always get the southwestern states. There's the Four Corners and Arizona, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico. I think I've told you before. Like my sister lives in Utah, and one time when I was visiting you, I was like, hey, I'll just drive up and see my sister. No, I won't. That's like a 10, 12-hour drive.
Everything in the West takes forever to get.
So
well, what's
out.
so funny, the joke about New Mexico is a ton of people from California move to New Mexico going, at least this is not California. And then 5 years later, we catch up to and then they go, and then they move to Texas. And so we're just kind of like a hop in between for people leaving California, but soon they will leave to go to Texas. So while they're here, we enjoy it, and they're in our church, and it's great. But I kind of know, you're going to move on. So and I can't blame you really. So.
Well, thanks again for joining us for this episode of Connection Culture. I do want to remind you to take a moment to subscribe, like, share, let others know about this content. If you found it helpful to you, then share it, because it will be helpful to the person you share it with. And now is the time to be sharing your feedback and your thoughts and your questions with us, because it will really have a huge part in shaping future episodes. There's a very good chance if you share feedback now, we will be able to cover it in some way or another in the next few episodes. So you could do that by leaving a comment on YouTube or Facebook. You can leave your thoughts in a rating or review there on Apple Podcast, or you can reach out to me the old-fashioned way. You could shoot me an email. My email is luke@mustincrease.com. That's luke@mustincrease.com. Let me know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. Connection Culture is a production of the Must Increase Network. The show is produced and edited by Bo Snyder. Show notes are developed by Nash Mead. Executive producer and host is myself, Luke Clayton. And until the next episode, I do want to remind you of this. Get involved with using the power of connection for good. How do I do that? You say, well, how do I do that? Well, be nice on social media. That's a great start. But also get behind the things that you believe in. You see someone that's putting out content that you believe is valuable, that you believe provides positive inspiration. Share that with others. Like we've said, share these episodes with others, because this seeks to be positive content, helpful insight. We want to inspire hope and increase truth in the lives of others. So get behind what you believe in, and keep this in mind. When you do that, you are going to find fulfillment, so much more fulfillment, because you will have been a creative contributor rather than just being a mindless, constant consumer. We'll see you next time here on Connection Culture.